Introduction to English Syntax. We have discussed earlier in morphology that morphemes are the building blocks that go to make up words. But English is not just a collection of words. Words are put together to form sentences. The way in which words are put together to form sentences is called the syntax of the language. In short, syntax is the way how the words are put together to form phrases and sentences. In other words, syntax is the study of the structure of sentences. To study syntax is to study the patterns and relationship of words, phrases, and clauses. Syntax attempts to uncover the underlying principles or rules for constructing well-formed sentences. There are two types of rules in syntax: phrase structure rule and transformational rules. Phrase structure rules attempt to describe the internal smaller units they are made up of. It also describes the ordering between these smaller components. Phrase structure rules are also called constituent structure rules because words, phrases, and sentences can all be constituents in larger combination. Transformational rules attempt to recognize the well-formed sentence and which sentences are related to each other. Transformational rules consist of deep structure and surface structure. Part of speech. Part of speech is basic unit of sentence. To understand sentence structure, we must learn to recognize these basic units. There are 8 parts of speech, namely noun, a term that refers to a person, location, or item. Pronoun, a term that can be used in place of a noun. Adjective, a term that defines a noun. Verb, a term that describes an activity or a state of being. Adverb, a term that changes the meaning of a verb, adjective, or adverb. Preposition, a word in a phrase that indicates a link between a noun or pronoun and other word. Conjunction, a word that links 2 or more words or sentences. Interjection, a term that is used as an exclamation. Syntactic categories. A very important fact about constituent structure is that there are different types of constituents with very different uses. There are 5 different syntactic categories. Number 1, noun phrase. For example, John, mailman, most students, many American, etc. Number 2, verb phrase. Verb phrase is another extremely important syntactic category. For example, snore, like Mary, sleep soundly. Number 3, adjective phrase. Adjective phrase is important in syntactic categories. For example, smart, very, fat, as crazy as John, etc. Number 4, adverbial phrases. Adverbial phrases are often used to modify verbs or adjectives. For example, soundly, fiercely, as fluently as John, etc. Number 5, prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase always consists of a preposition. For example, to, from, with, for, at, on, under, about, through, etc. For example, from Brazil, with John and Bill for nothing. Traditionally, grammars define a sentence in such terms as the complete expression of a single thought. Modern studies avoid this emphasis because of the difficulties involved in saying what thoughts are. It's even more difficult to identify sentences in speech, where the units of rhythms and intonation often do not coincide with the places where a full stop occurs in writing. In informal speech, in particular, construction can lack the careful organization we associate with the written language. It's not that conversation lacks grammar. It is simply that the grammar is of a rather different kind, with sentences being particularly difficult to demarcate. Despite all the difficulties, we continue to employ the notion of sentence, and modern syntacticians try to make sense of it. But they do not search for a satisfactory definition of a sentence at the outset. So, in other words, no definition was necessary. Sentences were recognized to sentences intuitively. Types of sentence. Generally, there are three types of sentences, that is, simple sentence, compound sentences, and complex sentences. Simple sentence. A simple sentence consists of a single clause. A clause contains a single verb or predicate. For example, Dan washed the dishes. Joe cooked the hot dog. Compound sentences. Two clauses can be joined to make a coordinate sentence. For example, Karim assembled the new grill and Joe cooked the hot dog. Complex sentence. Complex sentences are formed by incorporating clauses into another clause. Embedded clause is a clause that is embedded or incorporate into another clause to form complex sentence. Major constituent of sentence: NP and VP. Look at the following examples. In general, simple sentences consist of two principal constituents. In each of the preceding examples, the constituent of the left is called NP, and the one on the right is called VP. Each NP contains a noun or pronoun. Each VP contains a verb. Each NP is a referring expression. Each VP makes a predication. Phrase structure rules. A phrase structure rule is a series of rewrite rules. These rules break down sentences, establishing their basic structure, regardless of the final form of the sentences may take after transformational rules have applied. Each rules in a phrase structure rule have the form which means X consists of Y and Z. The first phrase structure rules, for instance, is S, NP plus auxiliary plus VP, which means that a sentence consists of a noun phrase, NP, followed by an auxiliary element, aux, like tense, that in turn is followed by a verb phrase, VP. Successive phrase structure rules indicate what NP, aux, VP, and other constituents in the sentence to account for. Word classes. Lexical word class. Leslie Jeffries defined open class words as those that contain the main semantic information in a text and fall into the four main lexical word classes: noun, verb, adjective, and adverb. Closed class or grammatical words have less meaning than open class or lexical words but serve important functions in language. Articles, prepositions, conjunctions, and pronouns are examples of grammatical terms. Word classes criteria. There are four word classes criteria. Number 1, morphological criterion. Morphological criterion is what a given word takes suffixes. Number 2, morphosyntactic criteria is what a given word takes suffixes having to do with person, number, or case. Number 3, syntactic criteria. What words a given word occurs with and the types of phrase is which a given word occurs. Number 4 is semantic criteria. Semantic criteria is what words mean. Morphological criterion. This criterion has to do with the given word that takes suffixes. Derivational, generally combined with the base to change its parts of speech class. Derivational suffix er change verb into noun. For example, teach to teacher. Derivational affix ly change adjective into adverbs. For example, happy to happily. Morphosyntactic criteria. These criteria have to do with inflectional suffixes and the information like percent, number, or case signaled by them. Example, percent, she writes, they write. Number, cat, singular, plural, cats. Tense, pull versus pulls versus pulled. Syntactic criteria. These criteria have to do for word classes are based on what words a given word occurs with and the types of phrase in which a given word occurs. For example, the dog stole the turkey. The children chased the dog. The cook saved no scraps for the dog. Description: dog occurs to the left of a stole in 1a, to the right of chased in 1b, and to the right of saved in 1c, but separated from it by the interviewing word for. Dog occurs in a noun phrase can be modified by a word, such as the. Semantic criteria. These criteria have to do of what speakers and writers actually do with verbs, noun, and so on. Two such speech acts are referring to entities and predicating properties of them. The term denote is used for the relationship between a given word and the set of entities. For example, nouns are the center of noun phrases by means of which speakers and writers refer to entities. Verbs, including be, signal the performance of a predication. Head and modifier. There are two central ideas. Number one, certain relationships hold between words. Head is one word that controls the other words. Modifiers are the other words that modify the head. Number two, words are grouped into phrases and that groupings typically bring together heads and their modifiers. A given head may have more than one modifier and may have no modifier. Every sentence has a head and possibly but not always one or more modifier. For example, barked loudly. Barked is a head and loudly is modifier, an adverb. Number two, the large dog. The head in this sentence is a dog and the modifier is the and large. Clauses. Each clause contains a head, which is the verb. For example, accountant was sitting at her desk. The accountant was sitting at her desk. Accountants audit our finances every year. Accountant is a different type of noun. If it's singular, as in example A, it requires a word such as the or a. In examples C, accountants consist of an accountant plus the plural suffix s and denotes more than one accountant. It doesn't require the. Plural nouns, of course, exclude a or an, but allow words such as some or more. Heads, modifiers, and mini. Head is communicate a key piece of information, and modifiers provide further information. For example, expensive books. The head is books and the modifier is expensive. The head word books denotes the extremely broad range of objects that qualify as books. The qualifier pricey indicates that the speaker is focusing on a subset of expensive books rather than the entire collection. Example B, the expensive books. The word the in B indicates that the speaker is referring to a group of books that have previously been discussed or are evident in certain contexts.
Modifiers fall into two classes. Obligatory modifiers, complements. The idea conveyed by complement is that a complement expression fills out the verb or noun and so on, filling it out or completing it with respect to syntax but also with respect to meaning. Optional modifiers. Adjuncts. Adjuncts, to join or to aid. Something adjoined, tacked on and not part of the essential structure of clauses.
Hello, my name is Nurlila. I will explain Model 12 and 13 about clauses and parases. Clauses and parases. Clauses and parases are building blocks of language that are larger than phonemes, morphemes, and words, and smaller than sentences and utterance. The clause is a group of words that usually contain a finite verb and often argument of the verb. Clauses are the basic element of what is called an utterance in oral language and a sentence in written language. Utterance and sentence are considered complex if they contain two or more clauses, where simple utterances and sentences are made of one clause only. Language acquisition. There is an extensive literature on the acquisition of relative clauses in typically delivering children in various languages based on the sentence repetition text with 4 years old, typically developing children. The following sequence of acquisition of relative clauses was demonstrated. English-speaking children first mastered subject relative clauses, the man who saw the farmer, followed by object relative, the cat that the dog cast, the indirect object relative, the girl who the boy gave his ball to, and oblique relative, the boy who the girl played with, similar performance, and finite genitive relative, the man whose cat caught a mouse. Language disorders. In contrast to the amount of research on word-level performance, e.g. syntactic morphology, there has been less research on the production and comprehension of complex syntax at the clause level in children with developmental language disorder (TLD). However, as children with TLD tend to have problems with complex syntax, problems in complex phrase and clause construction should be expected. Constituents, trees, and rules. Syntax is about the study of sentence structure. Rather, we are going to claim that the words in sentence are grouped into units called constituents, and that these constitutions are grouped into larger constitutions, and so on until you get a sentence. Certain words seem to be closely related to one another in the sentence. Introduction. Syntax is about the study of sentence structure. So let's define what we mean by structure. Consider the sentence in 1. The student love is syntax existment. 2. The student loved his phonology readings. 3. The student had his morphology professor. Rules and tricks. Now we have the tools necessary to develop simple theory of sentence structure. We have a notion of constituent, which is a group of words that function as a unit, and we have label, part of speech, that we can use to describe the part of those units. Let's put the two of these together and try to develop a description of a possible English sentence in generative grammar. Generalities on about structure are represented by rules. These rules are set to generate the tree. So if we draw a tree a particular way, we need a rule to generate that tree. The rules we are going to consider in this capture are called pre-structure rules, PRS, because they generate the pre-structure tree of sentence.
Grammatical functions and sentence analysis. Module 14 and 15. Grammatical functions. Grammatical functions are the roles that different constituents, strings of words acting as units, play in clauses. The 5 elements of clause structure, namely subject, verb, object, complement, and adverbial, are grammatical functions. Thus, the functions of subject and direct object are often realized by a noun phrase, but can also be realized by a clause. The grammatical functions of subjects. The most complex grammatical function is that of subject. The subject is a grammatical term used to describe the nouns, pronouns, and noun phrase that occur before the verb in a sentence. Thus, the subject describes a position in the sentence. In English, all sentences must always have a subject, either a noun or noun phrase or a pronoun, even if there is no natural subject. There are two semantic properties. One is simply that grammatical subjects typically refer to agents. The second is that they refer to entities that exist independently of the action or state denoted by the main verb, whereas there are many verbs whose direct object doesn't have this property. Sentence analysis. Language, sentences, grammar. First, language is a system of communication. If a language really is a set of sentences, it follows that different languages are distinguished by being made up of different sets of sentences. Second, if a language is a set of sentences, then the job of describing a language consists in indicating, for every sequence of words, whether or not the sequence counts as a grammatical sentence of the language. Third, the general definitions force us to make predictions about sequences we had never even thought about or encountered before. Grammatical sentence. When it comes to describing language, we can take our cue from this. Our ultimate task in describing a language is still to specify what the grammatical sentences of the language are, but we cannot expect to do this directly. What we can and must do is specify what it is that makes a sequence of words grammatical or ungrammatical. This amounts to saying that in order to describe a particular language, you have to give a general definitions of the concept grammatical sentence for that language. Grammar. 1. A finite language it is own grammar. 2. The function of the grammar of a language is to specify which word sequences are and which are not in the infinite set of its sentences. 3. It's an odd sort of grammar, tough, that doesn't specify any kind of syntax for its language, one far removed from our ordinary conception of what a grammar is.